McAuliffe and the two senators, and I just couldn't leave until a certain thing, but thank you for your patience. The hearing will come to order, and again, I apologize to my colleagues, too. Our witness this afternoon is Secretary of Commerce Penny Pritzker, who, quite frankly, I've been very impressed with since she's been appointed. I want to welcome you, Madam Secretary. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. You're here to testify about your fiscal year 2015 budget request. The Department of Commerce budget request for fiscal year 2015 is $8.75 billion. This amount is an increase of $566 million above fiscal year 2014. The department has a broad array of responsibilities, including activities impacting every American, such as the Weather Service and the decennial census. The Census Bureau is in the midst of planning for the next decennial. You're requesting an increase of $266 million, a 28% increase for these planning efforts. The total cost of the 2010 census was $13 billion. The Bureau has committed to a goal of holding the cost of the 2020 to no more than the per household cost of 2010. We would hope that you can commit to holding it to that amount or even less. $13 billion is about the amount that it will cost to develop, launch, and operate one of the new weather satellite systems. This is a sizable amount of money. We're looking to you and your leadership to make this the most accurate and cost-effective census ever, and to ensure that all information collected from our citizens is appropriately safeguarded. Likewise, maintaining and constantly improving the infrastructure necessary to forecast the weather from no employees to satellites in the sky and radars on the ground is another costly but necessary endeavor. You're requesting $2.059 billion to continue efforts to launch new weather satellites and maintain the existing satellite programs and supporting ground infrastructure. Another topic we'd like to discuss today is cybersecurity. You and I have had discussions about cybersecurity. I know you are aware of the constant and persistent threats faced by nearly every American company and government computer systems. Finally, we're going to ask you about repatriation or reshoring. We have discussed the need to reach out to the American businesses to get them to bring back their manufacturing and services back to the United States, back home. I hope that you can enthusiastically embrace repatriation so we can once again say, and maybe my colleagues have seen this sign, maybe they haven't, as you come up the Northeast corridor and you come into Trenton, there's a sign on the bridge that Trenton makes, the world takes. Trenton doesn't make very much anymore. We would hope that we could have Trenton makes, the world takes, light up in Trenton, but all through localities around this country. I'm also encouraged that the Department of Commerce is going to host a repatriation or reshoring summit on June 17th. This one-day event will be held in the Capitol Visitor Center, and Secretary Pritzker has seized on the initiative. Let me just say I do appreciate her attitude. She's been very open to ideas. I want to thank you very much for your commitment to this. I know you've been actively engaged in getting some top-notch inspirational speakers for this event. Perhaps you can give us a flavor of what to expect at the Repatriation Summit. As you know, our subcommittee included language and various directives in the Commerce, Justice, and Science bill for the last several years regarding reshoring and economic security. Up until now, up until you came, I think it's fallen on deaf ears. I'll expect that we can make every effort to comply with the various reporting requirements related to this effort in the House report. Today we'll have a number of questions for you, and should you anticipate more during the coming weeks as we review the budget in order to justify the request and help to identify areas where spending can be reduced with the least impact. After you've given your statement, we will open up the hearing for members' questions, but first I'd like to recognize Mr. Fattah for any comments he may wish to make.
Let me thank the Chairman, and let me welcome the Secretary. And before I make my opening remarks, Mr. Chairman, I think you'll join with me, and we want to welcome former Chairman Walsh to the committee room, and I served under his leadership, and it's good to see him again. Madam Secretary, the IMF said on yesterday that the United States economy was leading the recovery in the world, and that even though other economies were weakened, the work that's been done by the very capable employees of your department in all of its various agencies. On behalf of this administration, really, this was an international, acknowledgement of the great work that's been done over some 49 months of consistent and consecutive job creation. We've seen upticks in manufacturing. We've seen throughout this effort, after one of the worst recessions since the Great Depression, that this economy, which is the world's largest, has been put back up on its feet. And I really want to thank the employees of the Department of Commerce because across the board on a whole range of issues, they've just done an extraordinary job. And I know that it is it really, for you, I know that as you've gotten your arms around this, you've seen the eclectic mix of responsibilities. And I want to say a few things. One is that the Manufacturing Extension Partnership is an extraordinarily important priority. And I'm very happy to see that in the President's budget, in your submission that you've asked for an increase in that. But the Chairman has worked with me, and we've increased it over the last years that we've been in these particular roles. And I want to thank the Chairman because he doesn't talk about manufacturing. He's actually done a great deal about it. And we've also put dollars into advanced manufacturing. And then working with NIST, the efforts, the World Economic Forum says that the United States is an innovation-driven economy. So the work at NIST is critically important. So we welcome you. I've had a chance to visit many of the agencies in the department, and particularly the National Weather Service, and the severe weather events have cost our economy considerably. We've had more severe weather events than at any point ever in our history, and but the work of the National Weather Service has saved lives, and it has been able to at least give fair warning and appropriate warning in areas of the country where it's needed. So we welcome you today. Look forward to continuing to work with you, and I thank the Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Fatah. Ms. Lowy?
Thank you very much. Thank you. We need some innovation around here. Thank you, Chairman Wolf, Ranking Member Fatah. I am so delighted to welcome you. We are indeed fortunate to have someone with your experience and your judgment in this position, and I look forward to getting to know you and making sure we continue to expand the important work that you've done in manufacturing. It is, well, you've done so many things. Welcome and thank you. You come before us today with a fiscal year 2015 budget request of $8.8 billion. This would fund important investments for the National Institute of Standards and Technology Laboratories, including advances in cybersecurity and disaster resilience, as well as the development of NOAA's polar orbiting and geostationary weather satellites. Year after year, we see a change in weather patterns where major weather events are more frequent, more severe. Investments in weather satellites help determine both the location and severity of forthcoming storms, helping local governments get information out to the public and often saving lives. The budget also proposes $497 million for the International Trade Administration, an 8% increase over current funding, which would support interagency efforts to combat unfair trade practices and support businesses, small and large, by boosting U.S. exports. I'm particularly pleased to work with you in that regard because the economy is turning, but we still have to make sure that we help our businesses, especially our small businesses. I'm also pleased that the budget would significantly increase funding for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office with an increase of nearly 14%. Our innovation economy depends on the ability of the Patent and Trademark Office to evaluate the merits of patent applications quickly and thoroughly. And this funding, if granted, would help accomplish these goals. So I really am looking forward to working with you, and thank you for appearing before us. And We welcome our former colleague from New York. It's a pleasure to see you as well.
Thank you, Ms. Lowy. Pursuant to the authority granted in Section 191 of Title II of the United States Code and Clause 2M2 of House Rule 11, today's witness will be sworn in before testifying. I'm going to send, yesterday we had a hearing, and I'm going to send members information on it that maybe everything wasn't as accurate as was said. And so nobody knows who's going to control these Congresses in future years. But I really, and this has nothing, absolutely positive, categorical, nothing to do with you. That's why I wanted to say this before, so there you didn't feel it was a reflection on you. I think it's important that there be integrity, that when people come up, they just tell the truth. A lot of times, truth sometimes can be painful, but you just kind of get it out. And that's, had Nixon told the truth in 1974, maybe he sort of finished his term, but he didn't. I'm going to send members information so you can see what I'm talking about. And that's why we swear people in, and I think it's a good policy to do that. But that has nothing to do with you, but I didn't want you to feel, wow, he's swearing us in, is there a problem? But if you would please rise and raise your right hand. We swear in all the government witnesses. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Let the record reflect that the witness answered in the affirmative. Madam Secretary, you may proceed, and please summarize your remarks and proceed as you see appropriate.
Thank you very much. Chairman Wolf, Ranking Member Fatah, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to discuss the President Obama's fiscal year 15 budget request for the Department of Commerce. I want to begin, though, by thanking your chairman, Chairman Wolf, for your 34 years of service to your constituents and the American people. You have been an ardent supporter of funding for science and technology, foreign direct investment, and a passionate advocate for international human rights. I will miss working with you, as will my colleagues at the Department of Commerce. But I have no doubt that you will continue to be a champion for the causes of freedom and justice in the years to come. So thank you for all the time we've spent together and the guidance that you've given me. The Department of Commerce budget request for $8.8 billion reflects President Obama's commitment to support American businesses and create economic opportunity while building upon the important investments that Congress enacted in fiscal year 14. As you may know, the Department rolled out its priorities in our strategic plan called the Open for Business Agenda. The budget reflects our priorities in several ways. First, we want to build on 4 consecutive record-breaking years of American exports and the trend of rising business investment in the United States. We propose that the International Trade Administration receive an 8% increase, which will bolster our work to support current and potential exporters, boost inbound investment through our highly effective Select USA program, and strengthen trade enforcement. I should also note that 2015 will conclude the biggest element of the President's export control reform initiative, which strengthens our national security and allows for more trade with our allies. Second, we will continue to support American innovation. The Commerce Department is becoming known as the Department of Innovation. Over the past few years, we've laid down more than 100,000 miles of broadband, bringing more opportunity to businesses and communities across the country. We have also reduced the patent application backlog, although we still have more work to do. To continue driving innovation, the budget includes increased funding for research at bureaus such as the National Institute of Standards and Technology. As you know, NIST attracts private sector partners to collaborate with us in areas ranging from advanced manufacturing to cybersecurity. Looking forward, we will expand efforts to help small manufacturers adopt new technologies and increase their competitiveness. In addition, the budget reflects the President's call for the National Network of Manufacturing Innovation, a powerful model focused on pre-competitive research and scale-up risk, which already has bipartisan support in the House and the Senate. We will also drive innovation through regional capacity building, continued support for minority-owned businesses, and both executive and legislative efforts to continue strengthening our patent system, an issue that Congress is currently working to address. Third, we will do more to unleash the potential of data. The budget proposes significant increase to prepare an effective and efficient 2020 census. We have embarked on an aggressive research and testing program that will help us identify ways to make it easier for people to respond to the census. We will consistently review the benchmarks of this program to ensure we're able to meet our goals. As you know, business and government leaders across the country use this crucial data to make decisions about growth and hiring. Also, I recently announced that we will partner with the private sector to make more NOAA data available, accessible, and usable for entrepreneurs and the public. The budget supports this effort into fiscal year 15. Fourth, we will gather and act on environmental intelligence. The budget includes $2 billion for satellites, which provide weather and climate data to protect lives and property. These funds will also help businesses and communities adapt to a changing planet. I should note that these satellite programs are currently on schedule and on budget, thanks to our rigorous monitoring and management efforts. The budget also includes $519 million for our National Ocean Service, which improves the resilience of our coasts, as well as $917 million for our National Marine Fisheries Service. In closing, as a former business leader, I strongly believe that this budget reflects wise, targeted investments of taxpayer dollars, investments that will be highly valued by the Commerce Department's stakeholders. So I look forward to answering your questions and achieving the important vision laid out in our department's strategic plan.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I think it's good to encourage foreign companies to locate their manufacturing facilities in the U.S. We can create a lot of jobs that way, but we also need to ensure that Commerce is fulfilling its goal of working with U.S. companies to export their products. Your budget, in fact, is requesting a larger increase to support foreign direct investment and not to place more foreign commercial service officers at our embassy abroad. As you know, the bill carry language on Select USA, which we put in because you all requested it, and and as members know, I won't beat a dead horse, but there are Catholic bishops in jail today in China, Protestant pastors. In 1985 or 86, I snuck into Tibet. What they have done to the Tibetan people is brutal. We had a young Tibetan monk with me who took me into the monasteries. They didn't know that he could understand the language. And what I heard them say, they have cameras up on all the buildings. And to a date, maybe 119 or 20 Tibetan monks have set themselves aflame because of the oppression of the Chinese government. We just saw a thing this morning, a press release put out by the department. It said Hong Kong, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou are at the heart of China's Pearl River Delta, and the region has emerged as a global economic powerhouse, et cetera, et cetera. They're using Select USA, and it said during the roadshow, Americans, delegates, Commerce will participate in customized one-on-one meetings with potential investors, meet with senior Chinese government officials, and participate in exclusive tours of cutting-edge manufacturing facilities in Shenzhen. It goes on. That really runs counter to the language. I mean, I got a feeling that you don't even know about it because sometimes I used to work for a cabinet secretary and this thing came out. But it really does. And so the agreement includes up to $7 million for Select USA activities, but not to encourage this type of investment. I think we should Holland, Indonesia, the Netherlands, Spain, but because of the intensity of feeling, and I think it's a general consensus, but nobody got up and opposed this amendment. But I think to have this, and as you know, we did, reluctantly put the select money in because you persuaded me, and I think you were right. I think you made it very legitimate, but not here. Could you take a look at it and tell me?
Sure. I'm happy to take a look at it. Let me say, Chairman, you and I have talked a lot about Select USA, and working together, Select USA is both focused on helping foreign direct investment as well as helping reshoring. And that's something that is very important to job creation here in the United States. One of the things, in the last 10 days, I was down in South Carolina at the announcement of the expansion of a BMW factory in South Carolina. They're committing another $1 billion to manufacturing, taking their manufacturing of cars from 300,000 cars to 450,000 and increasing their number of jobs there from 8,000 to 8,800 jobs. And this is the kind of activity that we want to encourage in the United States, where companies are investing in creating good jobs here in the United States, and they're not only making those cars for the United States consumption, they are also exporting those cars around the world to somewhere over 100 countries. And so this is the kind of thing that I want to see us trying to encourage occur with Select USA. More businesses are recognizing around the world that the United States is a great place to locate for so many reasons that you and I have discussed, like our intellectual property protection, our rule of law, our great investment in research and development. So I think there's an enormous economic opportunity by creating Select USA and having it focused both on trying to attract companies like BMW, but also trying to working with our existing American businesses to reshore their manufacturing and production capabilities.
Well, if you will look at this and give me a call,
I
they're
will.
meeting with Chinese government officials. Maybe the very officials who were connected putting Xiao Bo, the 2010 Nobel Prize winner. Xiao Bo, the Nobel Prize winner, is in jail today. His wife cannot even visit him. She is under house arrest. And so for your people, Select, to be meeting, but if you could look at it, we don't
I'll
wanna-
take a look at it.
Okay, just give me a call.
Thank you.
Thanks. You and I have discussed the importance of reshoring and repatriation, but I see no mention of it in your budget request. We have included a bill language and $5 million under EDA for the past several years for a grant program aimed at assisting U.S. companies to bring back their manufacturing and services. It is not clear whether EDA is actually carrying out this program, and the budget proposes to terminate that program. From reading your budget, it does not appear that Commerce will be working with U.S. manufacturers to try to get them to come back to the U.S. Can you please comment on that? Because starting in fiscal year 2012 and each year since, the committee has directed the department to establish a repatriation task force to coordinate such activities across the department. Is the task force in place?
Well, the EDA is encouraging reshoring, and one of the ways that we're encouraging reshoring is through our IMCP program, and as well as Select USA, as I said, is another effort that we're using to encourage reshoring. EDA is, the IMCP program is put together to try and get communities that are focused on manufacturing to put together an integrated plan so that when we make grants, the grants are supporting their well-honed, thought-through efforts to how to support manufacturing in the United States. So we're doing a number of different things to support manufacturing.
But the task force?
The task force.
The language establishes to a repatriation task force to coordinate the activities. I mean, there was a web page at one time, they took it down.
No, the ACT task.
Back up. But it
Oh,
was down,
yes.
yeah.
No, it's on the front page, I think, of our website.
Oh, it's back up now.
Totally. You and I talked about it. I promised you I would take care of that.
And the task force is in operation, and that's back up on.
The function of the tool is up. I'm not sure exactly what the task force is, so I need to
Well, why
make
don't
sure.
we supply that, and then you can...
And then let me get back to you. Absolutely.
For the last several years, the committee has included report language directing Congress to create an Economic Security Commission and submit a report on key investments being made by our economic competitors in the world economy. And we don't... Is there any status on?
So the status of that is the report is being created, and we are using, since we don't have a separate commission, we're using our manufacturing advisory group to help us review the report, and it's covering a number of different countries. I believe it was China, India, I can't remember the exact list of countries, but the ESA is in the process of putting that report together, and it's my understanding that it'll be completed by year end.
Ms. Slowey? Or
Oh, you're very kind.
I followed instructions. I was told to do that. Mr. Vital was so supportive, he told me to do that, so I did what Mr.
He
Vital
is
told me.
always supportive, and we're trying to move this appropriations process so there are hearings that are overlapping. Thank you very
Sure.
much. Madam Secretary, I'd like to ask about the Bureau of Industry and Security's Office of Anti-Boycott Compliance, which enforces the anti-boycott laws under the Export Administration Act. These laws discourage and in many cases prohibit U.S. persons, companies, and their foreign affiliates from furthering or supporting foreign boycotts that are not sanctioned by the United States, particularly the Arab League boycott of Israel. Can you please talk about the current work of the Office of Anti-Boycott Compliance, including any resource constraints or other challenges the office might be facing?
Congresswoman, first let me start with BIS in general, which is BIS, I think, under this, our budget request is asking for $110.5 million. We think this is extremely, is the appropriate amount for us to be able to undertake all of the various activities that we have, including execution of export control reform, as well as an expansion of some of our foreign offices, which we think are very important to be able to allow us to increase the number of end-use checks and things that we are doing. In terms of our anti-boycott effort, we think that we're appropriately funded and that our request is sufficient for us to do a thorough job.
And I'd like to work with you on that to see what more we can do to respond.
Absolutely. I'm happy to get back to you and work with you on that.
Thank you. I'm proud to represent the 17th District in New York, and even with the economic success of the region, there are communities in economic distress. And I worry that the factors used to determine EDA assistance can dismiss large areas from needed eligibility. For instance, the eligibility requirement that unemployment rates for a region be at least 1% higher than the national average does not take into account that when a plant closes, the job losses are not restricted to just the county or the town lines. It impacts a whole region, but may not substantially drive up the unemployment rate on its own. Meanwhile, the plant sits empty. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of jobs are lost. And I really would like to work with you on this, and if you can share with me how could the EDA help communities that may be economically healthy, but may have pockets where plants have sat empty, jobs have been lost?
Well, first of all, Congresswoman, I would be delighted to work with you on this. And the EDA has a number of different buckets of funds that it makes available. One is the Public Works Program. We also work on regional innovation. We have economic adjustment assistance, which is a more flexible money that could be tailored to meet, for example, responding to a major economic disruption like you're talking about. And I think our budget request is about $47.5 million in that bucket, which is money that could be used to address the kind of scenario that you just outlined, one of a plant closing where a community has been severely impacted. So we have different pockets of money that we use to make grants in an effort to work with communities. The other thing that we're very focused on is trying to leverage our federal commitments with either private or local dollars so that we can try and get the maximum value delivered to a community, depending upon the program, of course.
I will follow up on that as well. And then lastly, regarding the Sandy supplemental, as you know, just over 14 months ago, the Commerce Department received $326 million in the Hurricane Sandy supplemental for a variety of purposes, including improvements in weather forecasting, weather research, fishery disaster assistance, repairs of damaged NOAA equipment and facilities, coastal hydrographic measurements along states affected by the hurricane. Can you update us on the efforts that the Department and NOAA have undertaken and are continuing to undertake with the Sandy supplemental funding?
Yes, I can. First of all, thank you for the funding to NOAA through the Sandy supplemental. We're using the funding in, let me give you 4 broad categories. One is to increase NOAA's computing capacity to allow for better forecasting. We're also using it to help mitigate some of the satellite gap challenges that are being faced. We're also conducting coastal surveys for safety and resilience, and we're working on next generation of storm surge modeling that can be used to, again, for projecting potential impacts of storms.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Ms.
I
Lilly.
look forward to working with you.
Dr. Harris?
Thank you very much. I'm just going to ask about several different issues, and I do, by the way, want to associate myself with the ranking member's comments on the anti-boycott efforts. Those are very, very dangerous things internationally, and we should fight against those boycotts. Madam Secretary, the polar gap in terms of the satellite data for weather, is that being resolved in the budgets?
Yes.
I mean, is that, so we're making efforts. That good. And do you view the department, because we have this little folder here on America Open for Business, and under the environment, which I think most Americans look to the Department for Weather and Fisheries. I mean, those are kind of 2 big categories. Interestingly, weather is not number 1; it's kind of number 2, and kind of climate is really number 1, which is the understanding prediction of change in the environment through world-class science and observation, specifically different from 3.2, which is really weather. Is that a change in focus? I mean, is the department really going to focus on its most important part of the environment, not being weather, but climate? Because I know this has been brewing in the department for a couple of years.
I would not read into how the list is organized a level of priority. The Weather Service and delivering the absolute best available information that we can ascertain is a top priority at NOAA and absolutely the #1 priority for the National Weather Service.
Okay, no, good. I'm glad to hear that. Good. And I'll just spend the rest of the few minutes I have remaining talking about what was the latest hot potato, I guess, which is this whole ICANN controversy. First of all, I guess I have to ask you very briefly, I take it there is a role of the department in transitioning this to potentially foreign control. I mean, this is your bailiwick, right? It is Commerce Department that is going to make this transition.
Yes, and this falls
Okay.
under NTIA.
Okay, so that the quote by, because I understand there was a meeting, I guess, last week in Singapore, so I guess that's probably 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, and a Syracuse University professor of Internet governance who attended the meeting said, quote, Congress really has nothing to say about it. Now, that's not really true. I mean, we could not possibly have nothing to say about a function that's being done by the Commerce Department. Is this professor fundamentally incorrect?
Well, can I explain the situation and let me...
No, I don't think we have that much time. Is he fundamentally incorrect about that?
Well, what Congress has to say is obviously about the actions of the Department of Commerce. I think what he's referring to is legally this is a contract that exists between ICANN and the recipients of a service. And what we provide at NTIA is an oversight of a contract. And so I think what he's referring to is it's not like we own the Internet and therefore it's property of the federal government and Congress has that kind of role. Congress obviously has an oversight role over NTIA and over the Department of Commerce. So I'm not exactly sure what the comment is about.
Okay, if it was a decision, a specific decision in the department, I guess, or somewhere in the administration,
Yes,
to not do this anymore after next year. Is that right? Not oversee the contract?
No,
To step back from it?
No, let me, the situation is as follows. First of all, NTIA, which oversees this contract, is absolutely committed to a free and open Internet. And it has been anticipated since the inception of this contract that NTIA would eventually step away from its role. Its role was envisioned as temporary. And in order to make this transition, and it's a transition process, we felt it was timely, NTIA felt it was timely to begin that transition process because we have 1 year left in the contract, but we also have the ability to extend the contract for two-year periods. So we have a very extensive amount of time for this transition.
Unilaterally, we can choose to extend the contract.
We get to unilaterally make this decision. And therefore, it allows us, during this process, we've said to ICANN, in order for us to make this transition, we want to make sure that there's an absolute multi-stakeholder model, that we maintain the security, the stability, and resiliency of the Internet's domain name system, that it meets the needs of its global customers, and that we maintain the openness of the Internet. Another criteria that we have set is that we will not accept a proposal that replaces ICANN with a government or intergovernmental organization. So we have a series of criteria that we have set and a process to begin to remove ourselves from what has really been an administrative function of overseeing a contract that exists between ICANN and a set of service providers.
Okay, so but this transition will be to another group or another entity that oversees it under a similar limited contract, just like you say our contract was time limited. Their contract will be time limited, the oversight.
The transition, I believe, will be that ICANN will remain, ICANN provides a set of services to 3 different groups, right? We basically are an administrative oversight of that contract. That administrative oversight function is to recede and not go to someone else. But to leave ICANN, we believe ICANN has matured enough to be able to execute the contracts on its own, which it has been doing. We've been just overseeing.
Right, so we're making sure that this, but once we let this slip out of our hands, once this is out of the box, there's no putting the genie back in this bottle. I mean, we've had function for 16 years. You say it's temporary, but 16 years we've been doing this.
Right.
Once we let this genie out of the bottle, you really can't get it back in. I mean, we really will have taken a step that may not be, and matter of fact, the only reason I say is because in the context, I am far more concerned this year than I was last year. Because we actually have, this country called Russia that is basically trying to expand its domain using internet control or suggesting control over opposition groups. Let me put it this way. The world is less free today than it was 2 months ago. I suspect it may be less free a year from now than it is today. One of the things we do is we're actually pretty certain that the internet does not become a tool of governments that choose to oppose freedom of the internet. There is no question whether it's even some of our allies. I mean, Turkey You know, saying that we're going to somehow, you know, not allow Facebook, or we're going to put a tax, an effective tax on. I mean, these are all things that have been discussed. This is not like these are secrets. These are things that things have been discussed that are very antithetical to our ideas of the First Amendment. And if we believe that we are a force for expanding liberty and freedoms espoused by the First Amendment, why would we even talk about letting this genie out? I don't get it. So those are rhetorical questions. The real question I have is, it does take funding for your department to do this transition. So the professor is wrong. We clearly have a say, because we have a say in funding of the department.
Exactly. As I said, you have an oversight function on that, so I'm not exactly sure what his, but let me, Dr. Harris, may I assure you to something? We at the department are committed to a free and open internet, and your concerns about another government or that freedom being reduced are shared by us. And what, in the process of this transition, unless we are satisfied that these functions, these services can be provided in a way that we feel that they're not at risk of the criteria that I talked about, losing multi-stakeholder or not satisfying our customers, or not, or if there's any risk that we think that ICANN could be replaced by a government of some other sort, or there could be, then we will not proceed. These are criteria that we have set up, because protecting a free and open internet, as you described, is something that we value absolutely. It's extremely important, as you said, not just to the First Amendment, to commerce, to government, etc.
Well, I'm just going to close by saying this is just not my concern. Let me quote Bill Clinton on this, because the former president, who I think has a pretty good read of what's happening internationally, says, I quote, and this was in a panel discussion recently at a Clinton Global Initiative event, quote, a lot of people who have been trying to take this authority away from the U.S. want to do it for the sole purpose of cracking down on internet freedom and limiting it and having governments protect their backsides instead of empower their people. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Well, thank you, Dr. Harris, and I'm going to go to Mr. Fattah. But I share Dr. Harris's feelings, and I think this committee ought to act. We saw the UN with regard to Syria. The administration tried to get resolution after 140,000 people have been killed. We cannot not move it. We have seen with regard to Crimea, with regard to Russia. We've seen anti-Israel things coming out of the UN that we can't get China to go with us. We can't. Dr. Harris is exactly right. And also, former FCC Chairman Julius Janowski said multilateral organizations have already taken disturbing steps. At the 2013 International Telecommunications Union Treaty Conference in Dubai, a majority of countries joined Russia, Iran, and China in supporting a measure calling on the ITU, a United Nations agency, to play a large role in international internet governance. Senator Warner, who I just left, and that was I was with Senator Warner and the Governor McAuliffe, said the U.S. has been inherently involved in the oversight of the internet since its creation. This legacy, authority, and stewardship over ICANN has assured the internet has remained stable, secure, resilient, and open. This transition raises serious concerns. And then Senator Mendez said, I haven't had a chance to engage, but I generally would have a predisposition against it. So I think the committee, if the authorizers would like, and we'll wait because we want to, I think the committee ought to block it. I think we ought to do everything. I mean, if we give it up, you'll be gone, everyone will be gone, all of a sudden we'll see. Look what's happening. When you go to China now and go to an internet cafe, type in the Dalai Lama, he doesn't exist. Type in Xiaobo, he doesn't exist. If what we have seen coming out of the UN on Syria, on Crimea, on these anti-Israeli, have you seen some of the resolutions coming out? We will say, oh, if only. So we ought not go down this path. I agree with Dr. Harris. Mr. Fattah.
Thank you. And Madam Secretary, you transformed Capitol Hill, because now the majority is for more government. And so we've arrived, I think, at a moment of consensus, because this is an argument for the U.S. government and its importance and a role in one of the most critically important infrastructures in our lives, the internet. So I want to thank you for that. And I want to go back to my opening statement. So the International Monetary Fund on yesterday said that the stronger U.S. growth this year and next will help the world economy withstand weaker recoveries in emerging markets, including Brazil, Russia, and it goes on to talk about Japan and Europe and how important the work of your department has been in this administration. So we've had almost 50 months, 49 months of consecutive job growth, almost 9 million new jobs. But what's important is inside these numbers, this uptick in manufacturing. Also, when the president announced that he wanted to substantially, in a disruptive way, improve our exports, you know, build it here, sell it everywhere, that a lot of economists, I remember reading in the New York Times, people say, oh, you know, this is not practical, this is, you know, manufacturing, we can't do this, and so on. And you're proving them wrong. This administration is proving them wrong through the great work of the department. And you talked about exports. I brought the Import-Export Bank and some of the other people into Philadelphia to talk about export opportunities for our business people. And it's fascinating. Only 1% of American companies export to any other country. And 57% of that 1%, Mr. Chairman, export only to one other country. That is that we really do need to raise our vision about where the markets may be for the sale of goods and services beyond just the borders of the United States. So the administration has done a lot of work in this area, and you're well ahead of pace of what was the goals in this effort, but we need to do more. And the other thing about Select USA is that you created something that is so important for business people, because now they can go, it's a one-stop shop. Because when we think about the Commerce Department and all of the instruments that are at your disposal to help assist businesses, you know, you got all these alphabet soup name agencies, but for an entrepreneur, they just want to go somewhere, talk about what they're trying to do, and have someone at the governmental level figure out whether there's some assistance to be provided. So this is very important, and there was a lot of resistance to these efforts that have now been overcome. I think that we now see, and there's a sense that this American recovery, which is very distinct from these other economies, you know, has been handled in a very good way in terms of making sure that the efforts that were needed in terms of the governmental levers to allow the private sector to be able to regain its footing and to go forward. So I want you to just talk a little bit about how you see the U.S. economy's role now, given your perch, going forward, and not only what the International Monetary Fund, what the World Economic Forum talks about in terms of innovation being at the core. To talk to us just a little bit about your vision as the new Secretary of Commerce.
Well, I think that, first of all, obviously the International Monetary Fund is spouting a point of view that I completely concur with, and they supported it with a lot of data. But if you start with the very fundamental things that I think are really important to remember, if you look at the rule of law that exists in our country, our intellectual property protections, you look at the commitment that we've made to research and development, our great universities, the low cost and abundant energy that we have in our country, and not the least of which is the ingenuity and flexibility of the American worker. And these are great assets that make the United States, and you add to that a financial system that has recovered and is providing access to capital. The United States stands tall as a place where companies from around the world want to invest. The other interesting thing that you see is they want to be here because they can make products here and successfully, but also because we have good laws and good processes, and we need to continue to invest in our infrastructure, but the ability to export. And one thing we know is that 11.3 million Americans have their jobs because of exporting. And those are well-paying jobs. And 5.6 million Americans work for American subsidiaries of foreign companies. And those jobs pay about $77.6 thousand a year. So my vision and the department's vision is to continue to invest in and to try and create the conditions in which the American economy can grow and we can create jobs in this country. Now, we is the private sector creates the jobs. Our job is to create the conditions. Doing that is to help improve our ability to export, help and encourage companies to invest in the United States and grow their manufacturing here in the United States. It's to work with manufacturing companies. And one of the things that I'm very excited to see happen is the potential for the National Network of Manufacturing Innovation, which I think it's a bipartisan, has bipartisan bicameral support, and I think is a great investment on the part of the federal government and a wise use of taxpayer dollars. That legislation proposes that we would spend, let's say, $50 to $70 million per institute to create a series of institutes across the country. What we've seen from the pilots that have been done, every one of the 4 pilots that have been created to date have had many, many, many communities come together wanting to have those grants. And what I've talked to a number of the organizations that have come together, universities, community colleges, the private sector, and the local governments that come together to create one of those institutes. And what do? They do pre-competitive research, and they help take that innovative technology to market and get past the most risky parts of getting a technology to where it can actually be then taken by companies and brought to market. I think that's a great opportunity. So one of the things you'll see in our budget is there's lots of investments to try and encourage exports and try and encourage reshoring and foreign direct investment, to encourage the growth of manufacturing, as well as then, there's obviously other things that we do, which is making sure that our weather service, which is absolutely essential to the growth of our economy, that we do a good job there.
I visited the weather service. I know it's very important. Let me ask you a question. The administration has pushed for corporate tax reform. As the Commerce Secretary, do you see that even though we get credit for helping to lead in the world in terms of recovery, that this is an important area that the administration still has interest in working? I know that we had the Dallas Fed chair making some comments about the fact that we could do more to help move our economy forward. And I'd be interested in what your perspective is on this.
The administration supports corporate tax reform, and what the corporations will tell you is that our corporate tax reform is not, our corporate tax system as currently configured is not globally competitive. And it's encouraging them to keep their dollars offshore and not invest in the United States, but instead to borrow here and invest elsewhere. And so addressing those issues could have an enormous...
latest reports that they're $2.1 trillion offshore.
Yes.
Because of this imbalance. And I'm interested, because of my interest in manufacturing, you said that our tax system is not globally competitive. I'm interested in how our business tax system affects manufacturers in a, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. How you think
Well, I think that
reform of it may aid
bringing corporate tax reform, the president has proposed bringing corporate tax rates down, and for manufacturers down to the rate of 25%. That would make them more globally competitive, and it would make the United States an even more globally competitive place to locate one's manufacturing. And so I absolutely support that and think that the administration is in the right place to do that.
Well, let me thank you.
Suggesting
I'm going to yield back to the chairman, but I am very supportive of a whole range of activities of the department. EDA has done some fabulous work, and also the export efforts. And we have to get you to Philadelphia so you can talk to some of our local business leaders. But I'll yield back at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I just say one thing, Congressman? I appreciate your talking about the employees of the Commerce Department. I believe those are our greatest asset, are the people who work for us, and they are really dedicated to trying to create the conditions for economic growth in the country. So thank you.
Mr. Adderholt?
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Madam Secretary, thanks
Thank
for being
you.
here today. Oh, you may recall about 3 years ago there was a series of outbreak of tornadoes that hit the South. Alabama got hit in a very big way. The district I represent in the northern part of the state got hit in a very big way. And one of the particular small towns in my area, Hackleburg, applied for an EDA grant in the aftermath of the tornadoes that went through, which, as like I say, has been almost 3 years ago. It destroyed entire neighborhoods, buildings, vital infrastructure there in the community that I represent. The grant was awarded, but it took more than a year to actually receive the funding. I've heard from local community leaders that these kinds of wait times is not unusual and don't seem to be better even if you have a natural disaster. My question to you would be, is there any EDA directive to streamline the funding process after a grant is awarded in wake of these type of tragedies?
Well, first of all, Congressman, my heart goes out to the families and citizens of the community hit by the tornado. That's terrible. The EDA is, I will say a couple things. First of all, in defense of EDA, we're not like FEMA in the sense that we're sort of able to grant in a kind of an emergency situation. We have a process that we go through. I am excited to say that we have the new head of EDA has been named and nominated, and I'm hopeful is going to be confirmed by the Senate still in this working period. And he is a former mayor, Jay Williams, and his commitment in talking with me about taking this job is in how do we be most responsive to communities, and to come in and look at the EDA processes that we have and our focus so that we can become as responsive as possible, recognizing that our role is a little different than FEMA's role in terms of...
No, I understand your role, but I mean, over a year is, vastly different from being on the ground within 24 hours. So,
Appreciate that.
yeah, we understand that you cannot be on the ground 24 hours later, but, I think over a year is really...
I will take, as part of my directive with him is to really take a look, frankly, at all of EDA to see how we can streamline our processes.
Do you know how long it takes typically to get money when there's something like this occurs?
I don't have those figures at my fingertips, but I'm happy to look into it.
Just, other thing that I think would be interesting to look at is see what the wait time for standard EDA grants. How would it compare when you have a disaster like that as opposed to, and also I'd be interested to know if you could check to see if timelines vary according to the region you're in. This, like I said, this, over a year I think is going beyond, and I would appreciate when you, as you move forward with this new person at EDA, that you would call this to their attention and say this is something that we need to look at and it's a real problem out there.
Absolutely, and I will look into the times it takes
Okay.
for that you've raised.
Okay. Let me just quickly, in closing, I've got one more quick question. Of course, the United States is currently facing a steel import crisis with dump and subsidized steel imports from a number of countries and across various product lines that are flooding the markets. The imports are causing injury to our steel industry and its workers. It's impeding domestic industry's full recovery from the economic recession. In response, the domestic industry has brought several new trade cases in recent months against unfairly traded imports, including cases on rebar and oil country tubular goods, known as OCTG. Both of these industries desperately need relief, but I understand there is some concern that a number of the department's preliminary decisions in these cases may have been inconsistent with its standard practice and methodologies, and the department may have exercised its discretion in a manner that is detrimental to the domestic rebar and OCTG industries. Also understand that the United States industry provided clear evidence of numerous subsidies, yet in many of these instances the department declined to make a preliminary ruling. Putting off a decision until the final does nothing to deter the imports that are flooding the market currently, even as we speak. While I recognize the department has significant discretion in many areas under the statute, do you agree that it shouldn't exercise discretion in a manner that harms the American worker and the industry?
Congressman, you know, to date, I believe we have around 31 anti-dumping and countervailing duty orders on steel-related products just from China alone. And I'm familiar with some of the cases that you brought. And as you said, there is some discretion, but not a lot of discretion. We proceed with these cases we take them very seriously. We encourage the parties that engage to make sure that all the facts are put on the table so that the review can be thorough and can be transparent. We're very transparent about the facts that we find about in the preliminary rulings what we think the damage might be, and then we encourage between the preliminary and final ruling is another review to make sure that this is a that we've gotten the appropriate information so that we're not have a erroneous finding, if you will.
Is there anything that, as far as due to lack of resources, that this committee can address? And
you know, as far as I'm aware, there are sufficient resources to deal with the level of anti-dumping and countervailing duty cases that we have to date. Thank you.
Oh, well, I think it's critical for the department
Absolutely.
to go after unfair trade practices whenever they occur or wherever they occur, and put the necessary resources to investigate and discipline any wrongdoing. So, you know, just like your assurance that from the Department of Commerce that you'll, you know, certainly apply these U.S. remedy laws and, you know, and make sure that you have the adequate resources to do that.
You absolutely have my assurance, and we take these cases extremely seriously.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Secretary. It's great to have you here. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
the good work you're doing. I want to raise a couple issues about the PTO. I appreciate the efforts that's been undertaken at the Patent and Trademark Office to examine the notice and takedown system under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and the degree to which it's accomplishing its purpose of combating online infringement. PTO most recently convened a meeting of stakeholders on their effort in March with input from a variety of people about their experience. I'm concerned that the current system is broken, and I'd like to figure out ways we can make it work better, ideally through cooperative and voluntary engagement through venues such as the PTO. I have the privilege of representing many constituents who create content for a living, whether films or music, and I hear all the time about the frustration of sending endless numbers of takedown notices only to see the same files uploaded literally instantaneously. That's not the way Congress envisioned the process working in 1996 when the DMCA was passed. It's a particularly overwhelming issue for small and independent creators who can't afford to hire teams of people who do nothing but send thousands of takedown notices day after day. One promising idea that came out of the initial discussion at PTO would be to at least standardize the format of takedown notices so they can be processed more quickly. I'd also like to see search engines take notices into account to downgrade the search results of frequent abusers, something they've committed to do, but we're not really seeing the results yet. So I'd welcome your thoughts based on what you've learned so far about how we can make a difference in protecting the work product of millions of Americans in the creative industries.
Well, Congressman, first of all, we completely support the rights of those who are in the creative industry, and one of the things that I did during very early on was spend time in Nashville with the Songwriters Association, talking with them about the challenges that they face in terms of protecting the rights of the product that they create. And for us, making sure that notice and takedown is implemented appropriately is something we take seriously. I will look into the issue of standardized format. I don't know what we do in that case right now, but I will make sure and look into it and get back to you about that. And protecting those who it's a real problem, frankly, but it's something that I will look into.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I look forward to following up with you on that. Staying on the PTO, last year the Inspector General for the Department of Commerce expressed concerns about the development of a secondary backlog at PTO. The IG acknowledged the progress has been made in reducing the backlog in patent applications and reducing overall pendency, including clearing out some of the oldest unexamined applications. But he voiced concerns about a growing number of applications that are now under appeal through the administrative process within PTO. 2 points on that. First, to the extent there's a new backlog developing in the appeals process, it's important that PTO stay on top of it and increase resources and staffing to deal with it. Second, and perhaps more important, we need to ensure that the secondary backlog isn't the result of a decline in the quality of PTO reviews, which have caused more appeals. I'd appreciate if you could look into that issue as well and get back to us about the IG's warning from last year. I'd like to know whether the secondary backlog is in fact growing and whether we're seeing a higher rate of appeal than we have in the past, and whether there's any evidence that in our zeal to reduce the backlog we're granting patents we shouldn't or rejecting patents that we should be granting.
So, Congressman, let me just give you a little bit of some information now about that, and I'm happy to give you more later. We are continuing to grow the Patent Trial and Appeal Board. It is difficult, though, to find qualified candidates, but we are trying to deal with that. In terms of the backlog, we have brought the backlog down to about 600,000 cases. Our target is to bring it down to 450,000 cases, and we think that is the right amount of backlog because, and we're growing, at the same time, we're growing our patent examiners by another 1,000 examiners this year to, I think, 9,000 examiners. And when you hire a new patent examiner, they are not, there's an enormous amount of training that goes into making them effective, right? And that training could take anywhere up to a year. So what we're trying to do is end up with the appropriate amount of backlog to keep our patent examiners to be efficient and effective at responding to new patent applications, as well as to make sure that we've got a sort of level inventory of work that we're doing. And so this is a constant balancing act, if you will, but we are applying also as well IT resources. And unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, in fact, in this budget we call for increasing the amount of IT infrastructure spend for another additional $8 million so that we can streamline both the interaction with the applicants, but also improve the quality of examination of prior art, which is something you were referring to. Are we diluting the quality of patents in an effort to deal with the backlog? One of the ways that we're addressing that is both the patent training of our examiners, and we're going through an upgrade of training this year. We have a big effort going on this year. So the amount of backlog won't go down as much this year because we're improving the quality of training. We're also improving the quality of our IT system, which will help us do better search of the prior art, which will then improve the quality of the patents. At the same time, we're trying to grow our patent appeal board so that we can timely deal with those.
Well, thank you. I think the numbers that you're referring to are of the patent backlog are not the secondary backlog in the appeals process.
No, I'm giving you the primary backlog.
Right.
And the secondary backlog, I'll look into the specific numbers. I don't have those on my fingertips.
I'd be very interested to know whether that backlog is growing as the IG was concerned, and if there's any indication it's growing because we're moving too quickly to reduce the primary backlog. Finally, it's been more than a year since PTO Director David Kappas stepped aside. I have no doubt the acting Director of PTO is very capable. Yet I think it's a particularly bad time for the department to lack permanent leadership, with Congress considering a variety of proposals on patent reform to combat the problem of patent trolls and frivolous demand letters. These are tricky and technical issues, and it's important that we get them right. And we'll need input from PTO to make sure we're striking the right balance. I realize it's beyond your pay grade to put forward a nominee, but I would encourage you to pass along to the White House the importance of nominating a new PTO director soon.
Congressman, there's no one who wants a Patent and Trademark Office Undersecretary more than I do. Having said that, I will tell you that the acting Michelle Lee, who's formerly from Google, is fantastic and doing a terrific job. But we are on top of it, and I am working closely with the White House to get this addressed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Thank
Great to see you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks again for being here today.
Thank you.
A couple of issues that I wanted to, and one of them may sound to some, I know not to you, as something that's way far in advance, but it's the issue of the census.
Yes.
And obviously, it's one of those issues that if you don't get it right now and soon when we get there, we're in deep trouble, right? And so I know that your budget request includes $1.2 billion. I guess that's for the ramp-up of the census, which is an increase of about 28%. And again, we all understand the necessity of the census and also understand what you're doing, and you're looking at technology to hopefully lower costs, et cetera. But any idea what, I guess the 2010, was it 1.13 billion, I believe, was the total number. What do you expect the 2020 census to cost? Is it going to be more, you think? And equally as important, if not potentially more important, and money is important, but based on the recent GAO report, are you confident that the census will have the technology and will be ready before 2020?
Congressman, thank you for asking about the census. First of all, let me assure you that our goal is to make sure that we provide a timely, trusted, and accurate census. And we are also focused on how do we do that at a lower cost per household. And we are researching the innovations that we think can help us to save, frankly, billions of dollars. One of the biggest costs that we have in the census is non-response. If we do the census the way we did the 2010 census, our estimates are it will cost us $18 billion to do the census. We think we could save up to $5 billion by making it easier to respond, by leveraging the internet, by using modern approaches to our field operation, by using data that has already been provided to the government, and by having more targeted address list development. And our objective is, during fiscal year 15, with the increased resources that we've asked for in the budget, is to test all of these efforts to see that they can deliver the kind of savings that we're projecting that they can. And I have a lot of confidence in our census, our Assistant Secretary running the census, John Thompson, that he is on top of our conducting this research in a timely fashion so that we can be ready to effectuate the census at the appropriate time.
And I think that makes sense. I mean, looking at, again, new technology and other ways to not only make it less expensive, but, as you say, more efficient and more accurate. After the last census, the city of Miami and Hialeah, they saw dramatic decreases in many of their formula grant programs, specifically in CDBG funds. By the way, we had multiple meetings with the census folks. They were great. They were responsive. And in essence, the city folks, the folks in Hialeah and Miami just couldn't believe that the numbers were accurate because, they're not rich cities, as you know. They're poor cities, and the numbers didn't make sense. And it appeared that in the case of, for example, Miami, that census was counting unoccupied high-rise condos after the collapse of the market. So there were all these issues, and one of the things that we also hope that you're looking at, and again, I appreciate that you're looking at innovation, yes, but it's to also just obviously figure out ways to get to be more in contact with the local communities who, in many cases. And in some places in South Florida, as you know, where we're basically the exiled community of, particularly of all Latin America, right? There's a strong reluctance to trust in government. And so hopefully that's something that you will also look at
We're
try to do a better
committed to
job there.
making sure that we have an absolutely accurate census and working with local governments.
Mr. Chairman, do I have any time? Can I ask one other question? And this is kind of unrelated to you, but it's related, but it's not really in your realm. But the President launched the National Travel and Tourism Strategy to make the United States more attractive and accessible as a destination, which obviously in South Florida we are all in favor of, that attitude. Many of the visitors that come to the United States, as you know, come through Miami, through South Florida. It's one of the largest, Miami's the second largest international gateway to the United States. We have a serious issue, however. By the way, and then we also have the folks that are going to go to the World Cup, who a lot of them we hope will pass through South Florida on the way there and spend a lot of their money, et cetera. And one of the concerns is the fact that we just don't have enough CBP officers. And the wait lines are, frankly, clearly unacceptable. The Appropriations Committee, I think, did a great job, and so there's going to be some new ones going to South Florida. And so I clearly realize that CBP staffing issues are not handled by you, they're by DHS, but given that the Department of Commerce's role in attracting visitors, is that an issue that you all have talked about to look at reducing those waits that obviously, even though you don't control that, but it does affect what you're trying to do, and I'm hoping that that's something that could be addressed at the interagency level.
So, Congressman, first of all, the National Travel and Tourism Strategy came out of the Department of Commerce, is something that I chair the interagency effort on the National Travel and Tourism Strategy, and I'm quite excited, frankly, with the partnership that we have developed with the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. In fact, he commented to me, he thought he was in charge of a law enforcement agency, but he realizes that there's an enormous trade component that he's engaged with. And he and I have spent significant time, and yesterday announced to both of our staffs a set of principles in terms of commitment to travel and tourism and trade to work very closely together. And we have an initiative, interagency initiative, that we're working on to bring down the wait times, because we only have one chance to make a first impression on the travelers that we do want in this country. We have 70 million travelers that came to the United States last year. And our objective is to try and get to 100 million by 2021. And if we can't bring down the wait times, then these folks are not going to return again or be encouraging their others that they know to visit. So it's a high priority for those of us at the Department of Commerce. And I feel very good that Secretary Johnson is #1 committed to our homeland security, but acknowledges that there still is an opportunity to accomplish that at the same time as addressing the wait lines.
Mr. Chairman, thank you again for your indulgence. I'm glad to hear that you are also focused on that, because yes, it is an issue that, as you say, we only have one shot at it, and right now we're not doing really well in some highly utilized areas like in Miami, where the wait line we had, Mr. Chairman, a couple of weeks ago, the wait line was the wait was over 3 hours. So people were missing flights, and you can imagine that when the numbers increase, which we need them to increase, and for example, just during the World Cup that's taking place in Brazil, if we don't deal with that, we're in serious trouble. But I'm glad to hear that that you're doing that. And I, for one, anything that we can do to help, please stay in touch.
And I would just, may I add something, Congressman, that in fact, one of the things the Secretary of Homeland Security asked me to do is work with to help him to get loaned executives from some of our private sector companies that are experts in dealing with these areas of wait lines. Also, I know that they are, speaking on behalf not of the Commerce Department, but of Department of, they are deploying kiosks, and they have the beta site was in Chicago, and actually early on in my tenure, I did go through that site. We were traveling outside the United States, and we connected through Chicago, and we re-entered the country through Chicago, and were able to use the kiosks and talk with the head of CBP there. And what I would say is they're very focused on the challenge, and I think the Secretary is very committed, and we're working closely
Thank you,
together on
Madam
it.
Secretary. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this is a very interesting discussion. On the wait line, just so I don't step on anybody else's line, the wait line has been a real difficult thing to deal with, especially after 9/11 in the airports. And before he went to DHS, the Secretary went to Disneyland, because Disneyland is an expert on wait lines.
Yes.
So we may be looking at other areas that we never think about to bring in their expertise to help us out.
Well, Congressman, just on that note, I have the folks at Universal and at Disney have offered to help the Secretary of Homeland Security on just
Right.
precisely this issue.
So I think that, Mr. Diaz-Ballart's comments are timely, and in talking about the census, I think that's timely too, because even though maybe 10 years down the line, it's still on an annual basis, we have to stay on top of the issues, especially with issues around technology.
Yes.
When the last go around, it was a fiasco and an embarrassment. But I just wanted to welcome you, Secretary,
Thank you.
for coming here. And I also want to thank you for coming to Sunnyvale in our district back in February. It was really a good visit. We did talk about USPTO, and we just want to also express the gratitude that USPTO is in San Jose. But I share the concerns of my colleague Adam Schiff regarding the backlogs and everything else like that. And I was wondering whether that backlog was due to the way we're not allowing the income that's coming from fees to be utilized in an appropriate manner the way it was supposed to be used for the USPTO. Can you comment on that?
Well, one of the things that I'm excited about is that the fee level, I think, this year is projected to be about $3.4 billion, which is a 14% increase.
They increased it, right.
And so, and this is going to allow us to do several things. First of all, invest in our IT system, which you and I discussed
Right.
at another time. The importance of that got delayed due to various reasons. And now it's really important that we continue this investment in our IT infrastructure, because that will both empower the new examiners that we have to be more effective, and also to streamline the work that they do. But I think that we're also building a good operating reserve. And the reason that I think that's important is, as we have economic ups and downs, it's important that we not lose the assets of the great human capital assets of the Patent and Trademark Office. As I said, the examiners are folks that we invest highly in when they join us, and they become real experts and able to really become more efficient and effective at granting patents. And so what we don't want is the ups and downs of the economy, and maybe the ups and downs of fees, to affect our ability to keep a strong workforce so that we can be servicing the innovation economy. So I feel that I'm actually, having continued to examine this, I feel really good about where we're at.
Well, I think the way the money was flowing, or not flowing appropriately, seems to me, that it affects states like California and Virginia, the chairman's district, where we depend upon the processing of patents and trademarks as part of our economy. And when that slows down, it slows down everything. So I think it behooves the entire country that we understand how to support the USPTO. And I don't know how we're going to do it, but I think that the sequestration should not have impacted your budget, because it was fee-based and not based upon monies allocated from our budget.
We think with the fees that we're going to have this year, that we're going to be able to adequately address the challenges that we faced before. So we feel good about where we're at.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you know that folks like us are willing to push, because when you experience a backlog, you end up getting blamed if we don't understand what's really happening. And I think that we need to expose that and make sure that all of us understand that the kind of challenges you face really depends upon the flow of your funding, and it affects your staffing, your training, your backlog, and everything else like that. And that ultimately ends up determining how well we do in this country in terms of protecting our patents and providing patent protections. And
Absolutely.
so, and now I'll get back to my notes. So on your commitment for promoting innovation through initiatives like NNMI and entrepreneurship and boosting the American competitiveness, you know that those priorities we do have in common on investing and rebuilding our domestic manufacturing base. In Silicon Valley, 1 out of 5 jobs are in the manufacturing sector, and we are the #1 area for manufacturing. Detroit's #2. I was told by Detroit that we were #1. And I don't have to tell you that not all jobs are created equal. Manufacturing jobs pay higher wages than most jobs in the service sector. We need a national manufacturing vision, the way Silicon Valley has vision for manufacturing, so we can have more American jobs that pay better wages and a strong economy. We want to make sure that we invest in enhancing the competitiveness of our small and medium-sized manufacturers. I'm glad to see that the $141 million request for the National Institute of Standards, NIST, Manufacturing Extension Partnership, the MEP. Glad to see that. And in California, Mannix in Northern California and CMTC in Southern California play a critical role in helping small manufacturers in our state create and retain jobs, increase profits, and save time and money. The MEP provides important services from innovation strategies to process improvements to green manufacturing. It also works with partners at the state and federal levels on programs that put manufacturers in positions to develop new customers, expand into new markets, and create new products. These investments will help our manufacturers overcome today's and tomorrow's challenges so that high-paying skilled labor can find a good home on our shores. So would you talk about the Commerce Department's goals for the MEP program and where it fits in the administration's manufacturing vision?
Well, Congressman, I too I think the MEP program is really terrific. When I took this job, I was unfamiliar with the MEP program, and so I made it my business to go out and visit with a number of manufacturers and talk with them about, particularly for small manufacturers, the MEP program is a program that partners with local groups and works as an advisor to local manufacturers, particularly small manufacturers, to help them adopt state-of-the-art processes and programs to be competitive. And it is fantastic when you see the effect of their work. It is, first of all, the federal dollars are well matched locally, which is something that is important. But also, it's great to talk to a manufacturer and hear about the streamlining, the effectiveness, the efficiency, the processes that are brought to bear through the consulting work that our MEPs do. So I think it's an extremely important part of our manufacturing agenda.
While you were mentioning that, and there was a discussion earlier on asking for consultants to help solve problems, and I think someone said that we're looking for experts in the different fields to help solve a problem. I think that was that
was the Department of Homeland Security.
One of the bills that we wrote was called EIR, the Entrepreneur in Residence, and it's a no-cost bill that we were trying to move forward, and perhaps the members of this committee and the chairman might want to look at that to help us move it through. It's no cost, and it's looking at entrepreneurs who are successful, and they're willing to volunteer their time for 2 years without pay. They would absorb it, and to be placed into different departments and perhaps into DHS to help places like Florida to solve their problem on the backlogs. If the chair wouldn't mind looking at that and discussing with yourself on that, it may be something that will benefit a lot of departments, a lot of neighborhoods in terms of the kinds of strategies that we may be able to pull from the experiences of the entrepreneurs that are successful.
I'm
They
not
don't need an
familiar.
income, and so they're prepared to volunteer. And Oracle and a couple of other companies have already done that, and so we're moving forward on that. So I'd love to have that shared with you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll take a look at that. It sounds like years ago, there was a SCORE program, I think it was called, where executives came in and did that. And I think it makes a lot of sense. So we will take a look at this. Your budget includes nearly $111 million for the Bureau of Industry and Securities. This amount is an increase of about $9 million, or nearly 9%. Will largely support export enforcement activities. I am somewhat concerned that sensitive technology will make its way into the hands of unfriendly groups or nations. Can you assure the committee, and can you raise our comfort level with regard to that issue?
Congressman or Chairman, I am, first of all, the budget calls for about $8.4 million to increase enforcement capability, analytics, and investigative capabilities for the 30,000 new items that we're going to be that we're responsible for under export control reform. We are absolutely committed to making sure that we have tight controls on where where our products are going. And one of the things that we call for is additional funding also to have additional export control officers in Turkey, in Germany, in the UAE, so that we can have increased end-use checks in regions where we're concerned about transshipment. These are places we think we're vulnerable, and our budget calls to have, I think, an additional $2.6 million focused on that. So we're very much focused on making sure that not only in our own capacity, but also working with our interagency counterparts, as well as the FBI, to address any kind of vulnerabilities or illicit transfer of U.S. technology.
We understand the department's chief information officer is stepping down. Obviously, this is a crucial position. You and I have spoken about cyber security concerns. A recent IG report found that the bureaus weren't even following basic IT security practices. Any comments about that?
Chairman, I would say that my IT leadership needs an upgrade, and so I am focused on making sure that we get the best quality individual in to lead. In the meantime, we have brought in the Chief Information Officer from NIST to help us run the department's IT until we've going to run a national search to find someone. But we absolutely need the best quality person. In terms of cybersecurity, I am absolutely committed to trying to get in place the best quality cybersecurity that we can. I am well aware of the threats, as you and I have discussed, and you have made sure that I'm well educated on, and something that I take very seriously.
You're requesting increases for a number of programs across the department, but one significant cut sticks out. You're recommending a $45 million cut in the weather service. Would you please provide us with your rationale for cutting funding for the weather forecasting activities?
The weather service needs to go through an evolution. And if we do the weather service the way that we're doing the weather service today, this is the way we're doing the weather service in 10 years, we will be failing our users. And we need to begin to evolve the operations. And this is not a radical change. This is, nor a wholesale change. This is an evolution. What we want to do is to free up capacity to focus on the last mile of our services, so that we are getting high quality, consistent information into the hands of decision makers. And what we're trying to do is really realign our budget at the Weather Service to increase transparency and alignment with our operations. So we have a number of things going on in the Weather Service budget, if you will. It is actually to improve the quality of what we're doing. For example, we're talking about centralizing some of our IT services, which we think is necessary to make sure that we provide a consistent service across the country. It allows for better quality assurance, it allows for better cybersecurity, it actually, frankly, from business, this is a best practice. And so a part of what is happening with the Weather Service budget is a real evolution, the beginnings of an evolution towards better management of, and frankly, taking advantage of the evolution of technology, too.
Is there a team looking at that, or is it just a few people within the department?
No, we in fact suggest that we in our budget, we create a transition office where we have a team dedicated to managing this evolution.
Any people from outside of government?
At this point, we are assembling the team, and it will be a mix of people both inside and outside.
Okay. We want to recognize Mary Kiza, your NOAA's Assistant Administrator for Satellites. We understand that she has announced her retirement. She has had a long and distinguished career at both NOAA and NASA. We thank her for her service. She's done yeoman's work. What are your plans to fill that position? Probably one of the most crucial in the department, particularly when you look at, and you were not here, the history of the problems in the satellites. I mean, it's been an area that...
Mr. Chairman, I'm well aware of the challenges that have existed with the satellites and Mary's announcement to retire. First of all, I'm grateful to her for getting us to a position where the satellites are today on budget and on schedule, and to managing through what was a difficult situation. The Undersecretary Sullivan and I are working closely hand in glove on to try and identify someone to fill that position. I am assured by the Undersecretary that the team around Mary is strong enough to handle the situation in the interim while we fill that vacant position. I appreciate, first of all, how significant the satellites are as a function in terms of providing information, but two, how important this part of our activity is and how sensitive it is given the vulnerabilities that exist within the satellite program, and our objective to try and deal with issues like the gap and other things. So I am deeply involved in this to try and make sure that not only do we have the right personnel, but that we don't lose the benefits of having put the satellite program back, as the external group said, back into good management, and the fact that I don't want to lose the fact that we're on schedule and on budget.
Well, you've covered the gap question, so that's not a position that has to be confirmed by the Senate, is it not?
I don't believe so.
You can pretty much move quickly.
That is my hope, and Undersecretary Sullivan and I are on it.
So when do you think you'd have it filled by? When is she leaving? When will she walk out of the door?
I don't know the exact date she's leaving, but she's leaving in the next couple of months, and we're in the process of beginning a search right now. I mean, she told us and we began the search. So we're moving post-haste on this.
Okay. On the census, the subcommittee understands the census may employ a, quote, bring your own device. If you could explain that to me a little bit, too.
Well,
what does that mean? What does that mean for ensuring security of the data that is collected on personal cell phones? But what does that mean? It
begins first by saying that we're going to use off-the-shelf technology. We are not looking, I believe the 2010 census at one point looked at creating its own technology. We're not going to do that, nor is it at all necessary given the advancement in handheld devices. The security of the census is something that is extremely important to us, and exactly how we deploy what kind of devices is part of the testing that we will do, making sure that that information is secure and that we have cybersecurity, the appropriate cybersecurity available to protect how we deploy in the field is something that is of high priority. This is part of what we're doing in testing and the monies that we want this year.
Bring your own doesn't mean everybody just has their own cell phone and they're going to kind of...
Well, it may be that I don't know, it actually does, but but what the question is, that you went right to the heart of the issue. How do we assure that we don't have vulnerabilities in terms of the data being at risk, right? And that's the most important thing. And this is all what we're testing throughout the year.
But look at the target. Look at Neiman Marcus. Look at if everyone takes their own, I don't know.
Well, this is something.
Doesn't raise my comfort level.
Well, this is why we have to
Cannot
test.
answer when they call me. I have to say I refuse to. I might ask if. Well, I think you really. This again, there was a great embarrassment the last time, and it was problems, and I think you're going to have to be careful with this.
Terrific. Well, and Chairman, I take very seriously the security and sanctity of what we're going to do and the data and being able to collect it. So this is part of what we're testing to see if it works. If it doesn't work, we're not going to do it.
The American Community Survey. Over the last few years, amendments have been offered on the House floor regarding the American Community Survey. One made compliance optional, the other prohibited the use of funds to conduct the survey. What is the Census Bureau doing to make this survey less intrusive for respondents?
Well, the survey is, we're doing a number of things, but let me back up a little bit. The survey, the American Community Survey, obviously is it was a continuation of the long-form survey. And we have been reviewing, top-to-bottom review of all the questions on the American Community Survey. We're trying to reduce, with the goal to reduce respondent burden, because we are aware of its importance. The American Community Survey provides, really important data, and the frequency of its being updated is very important, not just to governments and their funding, but also to businesses. So we need to balance between how do we reduce respondent burden. We're doing that by reviewing the questions to make sure that those questions are necessary. And the second is we've established a respondent advocate, someone to advocate on behalf of the respondent.
Is that new?
Yes.
So will that person be known? With how will the word get out?
We
But will
will
that be
make it,
on-
we'll get the word out. I don't know the specific ways that we'll get the word out, but we will get the word out. And that analysis that's going on right now should be finalized in May.
Okay. Patent and trademark, the budget request for the Patent and Trademark Office is $3.4 billion, an increase of $417 million, or nearly 14%. PTO has begun to divert fee collections into an operating reserve fund to provide it with a cushion for times when fee collections may be insufficient to sustain the PTO workforce and operational needs. In fact, the estimation is that their reserve will be $800 million at the end of fiscal year 2014 and more than $1 billion in fiscal year 2015, and the numbers in the out year continues to grow. Will PTO be lowering its fees? $1 billion seems more than excessive as an operating reserve. Has PTO established appropriate protocols to ensure that these funds, if and when they are spent wisely? And is there a plan to use this funding to work down the backlog? Or is there a number, like if I hit $1 billion, we're going to stop? I mean, or is this going to reserve? How?
Mr. Chairman, first of all, as I mentioned earlier, that the importance of having a reserve is so that we can manage through fluctuations and that we can assure the
Is
training.
that the largest reserve you've ever had?
Yes. Having said that, we are looking at now that we are building up a reserve that we think is, I don't know exactly what the right number is, but given the size of the reserve, we are looking at whether we should consider lowering our fees or adjusting our fees. Now that we're achieving a significant size reserve.
I think that would be a good idea. I'm going to go one question and Mr. Fattah, and then back to Dr. Harris. While Commerce has filled a number of positions over the last year, there's still a number of senior level positions at the department that are vacant and filled with acting Deputy Secretary Pat Gallagher, who really, he was a good person. You should have gone out to his house. And,
I did.
And,
I begged. I was on my knees.
he is one of the most capable people that I think ever came before. I mean, he was really good. Now, it's Pittsburgh's gain, but
And our loss.
yeah, your loss. I mean, has he actually walked out of the building yet?
No.
No.
He, June 12th, and he and I have been working on a transition plan. And I've been working with the White House on his replacement. And I share with you that this is a big loss for us. And I've been working with him to make sure that we have the right leadership at NIST, that we have the right transition plan, that things don't fall through the cracks.
Okay. But PPTO, as Mr. Schiff mentioned, EDA, NOAA, CFO, no budget offer. I mean, they're really, because I'll tell you, I used to work for a cabinet secretary. When all those are vacant, I mean, I would best, and if you notice, I didn't put you on the spot. I didn't ask you if you knew or didn't know on this. But if I would best guess, I mean, you probably didn't know. Maybe did. But you need your people there, good people.
Mr. Chairman, there is no one who wants their people there more than me, and I hope you might talk to your friends, your colleagues in the Senate, that I might get the folks through the process there. And I've been doing everything I can with the White House to get people named and then through the process. So I am totally, you and I are completely aligned on this and very focused.
I think that's why some of the problems developed. Last year you had actings, basically, and they were leaving, they didn't really. So anyway, Mr. Fattah.
Well, I represent Philadelphia, but to Pittsburgh's credit, it has gotten two great leaders for two of its universities. The former head of the National Science Foundation, at Carnegie Mellon, and now Pat Gallagher is going over to the other great university there. So it is a great win for, at least for the home state of Pennsylvania, and a loss for the federal government. But I want to talk to you about this question of job openings, not in your department, but in the country. The administration posted a report from the Labor Department last month saying that they're the highest number of openings ever, 4.2 million job openings nationwide. There are companies in Pennsylvania, Air Products and Manufacturing, others, who've had job openings for over a year that they haven't been able to fill. We talk about MEP. One of the things that MEP does is, Mr. Chairman, they have a meeting with all of the local manufacturers. I went to one at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they go around the table and talk about their challenges. And to a person, every single one of them said that their number one challenge was finding qualified people who had the math skills and the other skills needed to work in their manufacturing plant. I went out and visited a young lady out near Southwest Philadelphia in Broomall. She's got a company called NK, and they make boutique electronics. So if you're a professional rower or anyone who's interested in what's going on with the wind and speed, every tactical sharpshooter in the country probably uses one of her products. She's got a great company. And she said she hasn't seen any recession. It's just growth each year. But hiring good people is a big issue. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about, because we talk about, job creation each month, and it's been averaging around 200,000. But if there are 4.2 million jobs open in our economy, those are Americans who are not working. Those are incomes that are not being generated. These are companies that are not being able to meet their challenges or their opportunities in the marketplace as they see them. And of course, it's slowing our economy. So I know that this administration, that you have a number of these interactions with other department heads. I was wondering, in your interactions with the Department of Labor, how you see the nation being able to think anew about how to create more people who are not just unemployed, but who are job ready.
So, Congressman, first of all, the workforce training and skills development is something that's near and dear to my heart. Prior to taking this job, one of my major civic engagements was I founded something called Skills for America's Future. And then I founded an effort called Skills for Chicagoland's Future. And Skills for Chicagoland's Future was focused on the long-term unemployed. And your figures are precisely right. North of 4 million Americans, 4 million open jobs today. In Chicago, we had 200,000 open jobs and 240,000 long-term unemployed. And frankly, addressing the long-term unemployed situation is a very serious question. And we created in Chicago an intermediary to work between the businesses made up of the board of directors of 501c3, funded partially by the city, partially by the county, and partially by private foundations. And the job of the was to work between the employers in the region and the long-term unemployed. And what we found is there was actually a real bias against hiring the long-term unemployed. Long-term unemployed is defined as being out of work for 6 months. And that the recruiting processes, it wasn't at the CEO, it wasn't really even at the chief human capital officer, but the recruiters basically felt that why would I go and find someone who had been long-term unemployed to fill a job? I'm just better off stealing from my competitor, if you will, and moving people around in jobs. And so we've really addressed that by both addressing bias, but also working with the companies to say they will hire the long-term unemployed. And then we brought on-the-job training dollars to bear to help those who needed retraining. And it's been enormously successful public-private partnership in Chicago that we created. When I arrived here at this job, I made skills and workforce training one of the priorities of the Department of Commerce. And why do that? And it's not that we're spending, big dollars. We don't have dollars to spend on it. But the business community needs to lead in job training. And the challenge that we face at the Department of Labor, and the Secretary of Labor completely understands this, and so he and I have been working hand in glove, is that business has to lead in terms of what do they need to fill the jobs that they have open. And so I've been bringing the business community to the table to work with the Labor Department to try and redirect the dollars that the Labor Department is spending so that job training is focused on jobs that exist and jobs that will exist, as opposed to just, as the Secretary of Labor would say, train and pray. And so there's a significant effort that we put forward, and I think there are a number of tactics that can be applied to address this challenge.
Well, because I think as we sit here and we think about this, if we could match up Americans with these 4 million jobs that are open, 4.2 million, right? Our economy would be vastly different than it exists today. But we need to do more in this area. And it was fascinating to hear these manufacturers go around the room and talk about it. And in particular, Mr. Chairman, they talked about the fact that males of almost any stripe were a challenge in the workplace in terms of what are normally in polite company referred to as job readiness skills,
right.
Ability to show up at work on time and be prepared to, learn, because machinists in this manufacturing process they're going to make a lot of mistakes early on, and they have to be able to stay on the job long enough to the point where they're producing more products that are correct than are incorrect. And so anyway, it's an important area. I want to talk to you about NIST. Now, you have some $600 million. I've worked with NIST. We did a number of important projects together. One, we had a signing here in the Capitol, which I was able to host between the European Union and NIST to come up with joint standards. Because as we see these economic groupings around the world, it's important if we're going to export that we have uniform standards with other markets. And so Pat Gallagher did some great work in this regard. We're going to miss him. But you talked a little bit about these manufacturing hubs or centers of excellence that are being set up, and I think they're critically important. But we also need to have a broader pathway for other manufacturers to know about the resources of the federal government. So beyond these centers, we have our national laboratories that are there to help businesses who have technological challenges, most of the time free of charge. A lot of our businesses, our manufacturers don't know that the national lab infrastructure is there in place. And I'd hope that as you lead the Commerce Department, Chicago has 2 of our national labs right there, Aragon and Firma, that we would do more to make sure that large and small businesses know about those resources that are available on behalf of our government to help businesses think through some of their challenges in the manufacturing space so that we can keep the advantages that we have.
Absolutely. I think that getting the word out about the resources that the Commerce Department offers, whether it's in manufacturing or it's in exporting or different areas, is one of the things that I think that I'm very focused on, because I find these are some of the best kept secrets in the country, which is crazy. We need to make sure that these resources are well understood.
I won't recount the actual incident, but we had one very significant business enterprise who had a challenge around batteries. Aragon is the leading experts in the world on batteries, and
Yes.
we were able to marry them up and work out a problem that was very, very important for this American company to come to a better understanding around. So these resources are not as well known, and a lot of our businesses may think that there would be costs involved, and in truth, a lot of our national labs are there, and we have tremendous infrastructure in place, intellectual infrastructure in place to help businesses with these challenges. So I thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Dr. Harris.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I'm going to submit a couple of questions for the record. In my district, which is the Eastern Shore of Maryland and suburbs of Baltimore, the southern part that's on the coast really are poor economies, and they do depend on the recreational and for-hire fishing fleets. And there is some concern. They're just great. They're just great for the economy, those 2 sectors. And there's just some concerns about the estimate spikes and sea bass and things that we're going to submit some questions to ask you to explain. Things like the concerns with the changes in the sea bass, the size limits and things. And again, I just appreciate. I look forward to your answer on that. Again, because those industries are just important to those economically depressed areas of the state.
Terrific. Well, Dr. Harris, I'm well aware of how important recreational fishing is as an industry in general, and I'd be happy to respond.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I just have one comment at the end, and it's back to Select USA. I hope you're going to look into this and call me. And I think it's good that we encourage foreign companies to locate their manufacturing facilities in the U.S., but we need to ensure that Commerce is fulfilling its goal of working with U.S. companies to export their products. The budget, though, is requesting a larger increase to support foreign direct investment and not to place more foreign commercial service officers at our embassies overseas. And that is troubling.
Mm-hmm.
All you have to do is get on the train in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
I have family in Princeton, family in Philly, family in New York, and family in Connecticut, and family all the way up to Boston. You go through neighborhood, you go by my old neighborhood. It is in decay. The factories are closed. The windows are broken. The graffiti is on the walls. The weeds are growing out. And we were a manufacturing base. And if you look at what's taking place in China, the pollution, the corruption, and all, but so I really, and I'm sure you're going to be at the conference that we have.
Yes,
Yeah,
of
okay.
course.
But I think it's really important because we can compete. We can.
Absolutely.
Can. And I think, so it's great if we can get a company from the Netherlands to come. I'm all for that. And I'm glad the VW one that you mentioned, my first car was a VW. Bought it in a little used car dealership up in his district, up on North Broad Street. But I want American made.
Yes.
And it's almost insulting to the American worker to say that we can't make things. And the administration took this guy, Jeff Immelt, head of GE, who took jobs out of America to be the man. He was a disaster. He was the guy taking jobs out. He took a large facility from Winchester, many others. So you can be like Esther in the Bible for such a time like this. And I think you have a very, very unique background. I'm not overly enthralled with this administration, but I think your appointment was a good appointment. And I think you understand coming to business. This can be, not that you're going to solve the problem for the rest of your term, but you can begin to turn this around. And so we want to repatriate. We want to bring these jobs back. If an American company is abroad and their plant manager or CEO is working and he gets in trouble or gets kidnapped, he doesn't call the Mexican police, or he doesn't call the English police, he doesn't call calls the FBI.
Right.
And and anyway, I think this is really important that we do this. The committee appreciates your testimony. We look forward to working with you as we mark up the bill and do everything that we can to help you be one of the most successful. One of my former bosses was the Secretary of Commerce, Roger C.B. Morton.
Yeah.
I worked for Secretary Morton, who represented the Eastern Shore, where Dr. Harris was from. He left. I worked for him at the Department of Interior. Then he left and went over and became the Secretary of Commerce. And in many ways, there were big shoes to fill. He was a big man. He was about 6 feet, 8, something like that. But we want to help you do well so that we can create more jobs for Americans. And unless you have any closing comments, we'll just kind of end it.
Mr. Chairman, I have no further closing comments except to say thank you very much, and I share your passion for creating jobs and having American businesses grow made in America.
Great.
So thank you.
With that, thank you. The hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.
Secretary. All right. Wish you well. We're going to get you to Philadelphia.